From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. Here is your host, Seth Clevenger.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going to take you inside the making of TT's 2023 Top 100 For-Hire Carriers list, which we just published on June 26th. This annual ranking provides an updated look at North America's largest trucking companies based on annual revenue. But this isn't just a list of the top 100 largest for-hire carriers. It also contains information on each company's equipment, operating divisions, current executives, and more. I really think of it as an annual in-depth snapshot of the industry's largest players. So each year we gather the data for this project through an annual survey that we send out to these companies, and we also incorporate data from companies' public earnings reports and work with SJ Consulting Group to generate revenue estimates when necessary to create the most complete list possible. To review some of our top takeaways from this year's Top 100 list, I'm going to bring in two of my colleagues at Transport Topics, Features Coordinator Mike Senatori and Features Editor and RoadSigns co-host Michael Fries. Thank you both for joining the podcast.
Glad to be here, Seth.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
To begin this conversation, I'd like to start by taking our listeners inside the process of assembling the Top 100, as well as the industry segment list that we also include in the publication. So Mike, I know you've spent more time on this than any of us, so just walk us through how we gather and compile the information for this list.
Sure. So as you said, we do the info gathering primarily through the survey responses that we get from companies in the for-hire segment. The process of gathering the info is similar to our last Top 100 list, the Top 100 Logistics, primarily through survey responses, but also for public companies, going through public records to find stuff like their annual revenue, their net income, employee counts, equipment counts, all that kind of information we gather both through the survey responses and through the public reports. The big difference between this and the Top 100 Logistics publication is that for the logistics list, our friends at Armstrong & Associates, they help us a ton to fill in the gaps with the data. They provide a lot of information that they gather on their own. And to fill in the gaps on this list, we use estimates from SJ Consulting, sort of an industry that they use their industry expertise to provide us with estimates for some companies where data wasn't available to us. So that's sort of how we came to our Top 100 list this year. And for the industry segment lists, pretty much the same process of compiling the data through the surveys, through the public reports, and through estimates with SJ Consulting.
Yeah, well, thank you for that overview, Mike. And it really is a big project. In fact, I think we first started talking about this and got the ball rolling on the project probably late March into early April. So this is a month-long process. A good 2-3 months from sort of beginning of the planning stages to final publication. And also, I'll just mention that we do get very good cooperation and participation from the companies on this list, right? And there are, of course, some publicly traded companies on this list, and that financial information is readily available through SEC filings. But the majority are, these are private companies, and most of them are willing to share revenue data, and that is really valuable, I think, for one, to make this list as good as it can be, but it also helps these companies, I think, earn the position on the list that they deserve, right? So by providing this information, we can rank them most accurately and don't have to rely on an estimate, even if it's a very good estimate. What we want is the full most accurate data possible that we can gather. And our first priority, our first choice is always to get that straight from the companies. And pleased to see that that has been strong over the years. We've got really good participation, built some good momentum, and that makes the whole list that much better. So just my sort of word of thanks to all the companies that do take the time to fill out the survey, and hopefully it's worth it. Of course, if you're a top 100, or even if you're a company listed on the sectors, if you're more of a mid-sized or large but not quite top 100 level, I think it's helpful for your company to really kind of plant a flag and, here, is where we stand, among some of the giants of the trucking industry. So that's a sort of an overview of how we put this list together. But with that, I think it was a good idea to go ahead and dive into the rankings themselves. So, just taking a look at the list, no surprise at number one, package delivery giant UPS is still the top ranked company. Not a surprise, but I do think it's noteworthy that UPS in 2022 surpassed 100 billion in revenue. So they're the first company on this list, in the for-hire carrier space to reach that milestone. Certainly, adding an extra digit onto the revenue number. And of course, these rankings are based on full year 2022 revenue as the most recent full year. But not too far behind is FedEx at number two, of course. They're also not too far from that 100 billion mark at 93 billion. Pretty big drop off from there once you get past the parcel titans. But we see JB Hunt Transport Services, trucking and intermodal services provider, moved up one position to number 3 on the top 100 this year. And then checking in at number 4 is TFI International, of course, a very large and growing trucking conglomerate based in Canada that is the parent organization for many different brands and names in the trucking industry. In fact, if you look at our top 100 list each year, I think that TFI has the most elaborate company operating divisions description, because there's so many companies and so many acquisitions over the years that operate under TFI. And then just rounding out the top 5 is XPO. XPO is down a little bit. They were number 3 a year ago. But there's been some changes there, right? XPO is now a pure play LTL provider. They've spun off their freight brokerage division, which is now RXO. And a couple years back, they also spun off their contract logistics and warehousing e-commerce fulfillment division, and that's now GXO. So there's our top 5. Familiar names, but some interesting movement, and also some very interesting changes further down the list. Michael, I'd like to bring you in and hear your perspective on the updated list. What stands out to you as you take a look at this year's top 100 for-hire carriers?
Well, the phrase that comes to mind when I see the list is the more things change or the more things get consolidated, the more they stay the same. So I mean, when you look at the top 100 list in totality, there's a handful of newbies to that list. I think 3 altogether. You have ITS Logistics at 47. You have Road One at 67, and at the 100 list, 100 spot, you have national carriers. That's it kind of tells me that, and it's just a little bit of what you touched upon, Seth, where you have that the M&A consolidation effect on that particular list. There's some that have made slight adjustments. For instance, one thing that came to mind, Hirschbach motor lines. They were 64 last year. Now they jumped up to 45. That was one big improvement from them being on this particular list. But what it tells me is just that the bigger are getting bigger, as you just stated with UPS. Reaching that notable mark. So it's just kind of just seeing the shuffling that's going on within that top 100 list. That's the thing that really captured my eye.
Yeah, and really, we'll get into this a little bit later, but looking across the board, most of these companies continued to grow last year. The freight market did soften, certainly in the second half of 2022, and that's continued through the first half of this year. But still, you review the revenue and a lot of the net income data as well from last year. 2022 was a good year for large for-hire motor carriers. If you're a smaller operator, especially if you are mostly doing business on the spot market, I think it's a very different story. But for the very large carriers out there, was another good year last year. Mike, I want to bring you in as well. Now that we're at the end of this project, and you can, really take a look at the list in its totality. What are some of your top takeaways, and what stands out to you?
Yeah, so as you guys were saying, a lot of growth on the top 100 this year, pretty much across the board. huge increases in revenue for a lot of these companies due to them expanding their services and diversifying their operations in a lot of cases. There's the jumps in revenue, but in terms of the rankings themselves, when compared to last year, especially at the top of the list, there were a lot of small jumps, companies moving one or two spots on our list, but no real big leaps. Within the top 30, no company moved more than two spots up or down. So I think that goes to show that this sort of gives a really sort of a clear shape to the very top of the for hire industry. At the same time, even within the top 10, there was a lot of mergers and acquisitions. The big one everyone's talking about between Knight Swift and US Express. It's not reflected on our list just yet this year because the acquisition is still pending, has not closed as of yet. But also companies like JB Hunt, which ranks number 3, making some acquisitions themselves. In early 2022, they acquired supply chain solutions provider Zenith Freight Lines, specializing in sort of home furnishing transportation. And also number 8 on our list, Schneider. Also in 2022, they acquired both Midwest Logistics Systems and DeBoer Transportation, and that gave them a real significant boost to their dedicated services. So instances like that show you that these companies at the top of the industry constantly making acquisitions, constantly consolidating with other companies, and it's really, helping them to continue their growth even in years like last year where the market wasn't necessarily as favorable as it has been in years past.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting that, of course, some companies that did grow their revenue actually did see their ranking decline because others grew faster. So that's still was a growth year for the large companies in the trucking industry. And to be clear, of course, trucking remains a very fragmented industry. Most of the work continues to be done by small and medium-sized businesses. That being said, there is this sort of gradual shift toward more consolidation, and the big get bigger. You can see that clearly reflected on this list. And we've been talking a little bit about M&A, mergers and acquisitions. So I would like to turn to that and maybe just get a little bit of a closer look, what we saw this past year or so, on that front. So yes, Knight Swift, as you mentioned, Mike. Knight Swift acquiring US Express, is just a huge change in the truckload segment, and it's the biggest acquisition in the truckload segment since Knight Swift merged, right? So, right, and that transaction was announced back in March, but because it hadn't closed at press time, we did keep separate rankings, as Mike mentioned. So, that being said, if we combine the revenues of US Express to Knight Swift, that would have pushed Knight Swift to number 4 on this list based on their combined 2022 revenue. You do the math, add them together, and together it'd be about 9.6 billion. So clearly already a giant in the truckload space, but even bigger with US Express. And of course, we'll watch that closely as time goes on. Another big truckload carrier that's moving up through acquisition is Heartland Express at number 58 on our list. And that's a pretty good jump from 66 a year ago. So a couple high-profile acquisitions. They acquired Smith Transport in June of 2022. And they also purchased CFI's non-dedicated U.S. truckload business, as well as a business in Mexico from TFI. And that was in August of 2022. Another one that comes to mind here is Fast Freight Group, a diversified carrier based in Canada. They climbed number 59 on our top 100, up from 72 a year ago. And part of that reflects a majority stake in Challenger Motor Freight. And Challenger was number 78 on our list last year. Also see this in the refrigerated trucking segment. And the big one there is Hirschbach Motor Lines. Michael, you mentioned they acquired another top 100 company last year, John Christner Trucking, which had been number 87 on our list. So we're seeing some of these companies that are top 100 level starting to merge. And that, for one, that does create some opportunity for other companies to crack the top 100 list. But I think more relevant from a business perspective is that the big do keep getting bigger. Mike, I'll maybe just ask you to weigh in a little bit more on some of the acquisitions we've seen. Any other M&A activity that stands out to you as you look back over the past year?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Fast Freight Group, their acquisition of Challenger Motor Freight, that gave them a really huge boost this year. Their revenue from 2021 to 2022 nearly doubled. So that played a huge part in their moving up the list. But what stood out to me the most from that group you just mentioned, sort of the combinations of former top 100 companies from that group you just mentioned, is Hirschbach Motor Lines. Uh, of all the companies on the top 100 this year, they made the biggest rankings leap. They moved up 19 spots when compared to last year. They were number 64 on the 2022 list and number 45 this year. Their revenue increased by 95%, and that was in large part due to the acquisition of John Christner Trucking. In 2021, John Christner Trucking had a revenue of over $300 million and operating mostly in the refrigerated sector. And that helped Hirschbach more than double their refrigerated revenue in 2022. So, as you were saying, sort of these acquisitions, you know, by companies in the top 100 of companies in the top 100, it's really helping to push some of these carriers further up the list and really help them to continue to grow their operations.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Michael, anything else as you look at M&A and consolidation in the trucking industry? Any other examples that either piqued your interest or stand out to you as being interesting examples of how the industry is changing?
Oh yes, the two that you had mentioned, the first two that you had mentioned, Heartland Express and Fast Freight Group. One of the things that the similarities to those particular groups and the acquisitions that they made were location. With Heartland, they had acquired Smith Transport, June of 22, but they've also purchased CFI Logistica in Mexico. To have that imprint, south of the border, that was very important for Heartland Express to make that deal. And also with Fast Freight, being from Canada, they had they're partnering with Challenger Motor Freight. That's a majority stake in that cross border trucking company. So having that location and having that regional power, whichever way they want to wield that, I think that would be a great advantage for them. And maybe that next year, their market share will grow even more.
If your transportation and logistics operation doesn't have a full-time CFO to guide you through challenging financial decisions, you may be the perfect fit for Summit Virtual CFO by Anders. Find out how by visiting summitcpa.net.
Yeah, well, appreciate that insight, and also wanted to take a look at the overall business environment for motor carriers right now. Of course, our top 100 publication isn't just the list, the top 100 list and sector lists. We also do look at the trends and the issues that are facing the industry. One of those, of course, is always just looking at the overall economic conditions and freight market conditions. And as we mentioned before, yes, the freight market softened last year. It was coming down off of just an absolute banner year for trucking in 2021. Especially the second half of last year, we really saw both the freight market soften and also truck capacity really loosened up. Bargaining power has certainly swung back toward shippers now, as in this looser capacity environment. That being said, if you're a large trucking company, North America, you probably continued to grow last year. So just looking through company to company, nearly all the companies that appear on the top 100 did have full year revenue gains in 2022. Net income results were a little bit more mixed. Not all carriers report that information, but from those who do, it was the majority still managed to increase their profits. Even though the market conditions were less favorable in the second half of the year, and moving into 2023 as well. Mike, your takeaways as you look at the revenue and profitability figures that we gathered for the project.
Yeah, so you said nearly all of the companies on the top 100 saw full year revenue gains. There was only one company on the list that saw a decrease in their full year revenue from 2021 to 2022. So I think that speaks to sort of the scope of that and how almost all of these companies are really, growing their businesses consistently. Within the top 15, eight of those companies saw their revenue increase by at least $1 billion. So these sort of massive growths for these companies. And it's remarkable how they're able to continue expanding their business and increasing in size despite these shaky market conditions. And as you said, profits were more of a mixed bag, especially at the top. Companies like UPS and FedEx, they both saw decreased profits in 2022. And this is where those market conditions really come into play, with companies like FedEx warning of decreased demand, which led to lower sales for them throughout 2022, but especially in the back half of the year, as you mentioned. And another culprit here is rising inflation. This obviously it's affecting everyone, but for these companies, it's really increasing their expenses across the board. So that lends itself to the drops in net income that we see in a few spots on the list.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great overview. And of course, we're watching some of the economic indicators closely as we move into the second half of 2023 to see, when the market cycle might turn, in the freight market, but also what is the macroeconomic condition, situation that, how long will consumer spending hold up, for example. So these are all topics, of course, that we will be watching closely. But another topic that I want to get to is workforce development. So as part of our Top 100 project, we always examine some of these key industry issues, and really right at the top of that list, I guess for as long as I've been covering the industry, is driver recruiting and retention. So our cover story for the publication looks into how fleets are working to attract that next generation of professional drivers to enter this industry. So let's get into that topic. Michael, you've spent a lot of time on this issue over the years, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on the workforce issue, and how do you think trucking companies can bring in younger people and really find that next generation of drivers to fill the ranks of some of the retirees that we're going to see?
Well, there was a great story in the top 100 issue by Mindy Log, just really hitting those particular points about the retention and recruitment problem that the trucking industry has been, working with. They're currently battling, but it's definitely a challenge. And one of the things, Seth, about it is just my experience and just covering this topic is it's definitely generational, and it's generational on both sides, from the employee to the employer. You have the employer that needs to think of creative ways to attract new drivers, and there's two things that they're running up against. One, it's the generational shift, and it was pointed out in the article as well. There's one quote that I saw that said that the previous generation was to the live to work, where this potential generation, the Gen Z they they're working to live, and that's a particular niche that these companies have to address if they want to attract those particular drivers. And another thing is the whole age component. You want to attract new drivers. There've been laws that have been put in place that are lowering the age of interstate commercial travel from 21 to 18. But the average age of a new driver getting into the trucking business is somewhere between 35 and 38, where the average age of a veteran driver is somewhere around hovering between 50 and 55. So there's a dynamic that they have to address right there, and just kind of getting into those particular creative ways to attract these drivers. One of the things that I've always asked people is, what have you met those people where they're at, at the high schools or at particular communities where, they might not be privy to a career in trucking. So it's those particular battles that need to be fought on that particular ground level. And there are some companies that have been doing that. They have training schools. They go to on-site fair classes, just to promote the career of trucking. And then another thing too about that as well, it's not so much framed in the sense of, this generation doesn't want to, be in the trucking business. It's, you kind of have to go find these people, because it's one thing that you're going to have an over the road a trucker where you're going to be gone for a few days. That might not be appealing to some people, but there are some people out there, probably particularly some young people out there, who probably love that. If you went to a young person right now and said to them, do you want to travel and get paid to travel? I think 11 out of 10 of them would probably say yes. And starting from that particular point, you want to explain to them and be quite honest with them in the sense of what will entail a career in driving in driving a truck. You got to talk about the challenges involved. You got to talk about there's going to be times when you have a flat tire. There's going to be times where we're going to have engine problems. There's going to be times when there's going to be certain things that are going to halter you in driving this truck and making these particular deliveries. I mean, it's something you got to. I mean, there's one thing of promoting the good, but you also have to bring in the realistic tendencies that come with a career in trucking. But there are people out there. I think it's really on the truck drivers. I mean, not truck drivers, the trucking companies that need to promote this and give the reality of what it's all about. I mean, but there's a lot more good than bad in it, obviously. But there has to be some creativity involved, and there's some companies that are doing that, and it's just going to be a very slow process, and a generational process. So you're not going to solve the driving shortage problem tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. But I mean, you definitely have to have some progress and figure out where these people who want to be in the trucking industry, find out where they are and really engage them.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think it's interesting, it's kind of eye-opening, that, statistic of, the average professional driver entering the industry, in their 30s, because it so often is a second or a third career. And part of that is the long time rule that you'd have to be 21 to operate a truck in interstate commerce. Of course, there's a pilot program underway where you can sign up 18, 19, 20-year-olds to through an apprenticeship program, which is, could open the doors for more people to look at trucking as a first career opportunity, a career that you choose for yourself. Not as a second or third option, but as a first option. That being said, it was interesting to in Mindy's story, some of the takeaways on preferences of younger people, millennials, Gen Z. I guess I'm technically an old millennial myself, so I'm sort of connected to that cohort a little bit, but more of a sense of work-life balance, as you put it. I think home time is becoming more and more important. It's not just pay. Pay is always important, of course, and that's not changing. But I think that you'll see more drivers in the future would prefer to be home more often, even if it means a little bit less on the paycheck, based on the routes they're running, and just more desire to have the flexibility also, if you are over the road, to be home when you want to be home. So it's going to be really incumbent on managers in the trucking industry to try to create schedules and networks and routes that really work for their drivers' preferences, not just their customer preferences. And that's quite a balancing act, of course.
I think another thing too is the percentage of high schoolers right now and the younger population not having driver's licenses. I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a very, I think that's an underlying stat that's really surprising to me. I mean, and there are people I know of a certain age of in their 20s and such that don't have driver's licenses, and it's really prevalent in the metro areas, especially in the DC area and other other big metro areas like Atlanta and Houston. So I think that's one thing that these managers have to deal with as well. You want you want to have more drivers, especially younger drivers that have a career in driving a truck, when some of them don't even have driver
Well,
licenses.
that's the foundation, right? First, you got to learn
Yeah.
how to drive a car before you figure out how to drive a 18 wheeler, and that does limit the potential labor pool to some extent. And I know you and me we're both from Ohio, so we're like, oh, you have a driver's license when you're 16, and
Yeah.
it's kind of how you get around. But yeah, if you live in a large metro area, and it's hard to it's expensive just to park a car, right? You can see why a lot of people, and if you have good public transport, then fewer people, young people, are getting driver's licenses right away. That is an interesting dynamic. And uh, one other thing I'll add is I think company culture is becoming more important to employees. I think that applies to everyone to some extent, but I think that younger people in particular want to feel good about who they work for. They want to feel good about their company. They want to feel connected to their company. So engagement, communication, all really important. Probably don't want to just be, hey, here's your route. Go pick up the load and talk to you, at some point down the line. You want to feel connected to your company. So that seems to be a trend as well, and probably a leading indicator of what fleet management and driver management might look like in the years ahead. But a good topic, and I'm glad we were able to touch on that a little bit on this in this conversation. But turning back to the data in the publication, I've mentioned that along with the top 100 list, we also published several industry sector lists that we're looking at the largest companies in specific segments within the trucking industry. So that includes LTL, refrigerated, flatbed, bulk. You get the parcel couriers and several others as well. But Mike, were some big changes or maybe points of interest that you'd like to discuss as you look over those sector lists that we compiled this year?
Yeah, so similar to the top 100 lists, across the sector lists, there was a lot of growth in revenues for these huge companies, but also similar to the top 100, not a ton of major rankings shifts near the top of these lists. Um, every company that ranked number one on one of these lists last year maintained that position this year. And looking specifically at the truckload segment, we discussed the Knight-Swift and US Express planned acquisition, but its potential effect on the truckload sector is going to be huge. Knight-Swift retained its number one spot on the list this year, but JB Hunt and Landstar System aren't very far behind, and that's something that I expect to change next year. With the US Express and Knight-Swift deal, it's probably going to cement Knight-Swift as the unquestioned leader in that business segment for sure. On the flatbed and heavy specialized list, we saw yet again some tight competition between Dasky and Landstar System. I thought that was interesting that last year their revenues were pretty tight at 1 and 2 on the list, and that held true for this year as well, despite both of them growing pretty significantly. So that's something to keep an eye on, definitely. And in the air and expedited segment, Covenant Logistics overtook ArcBest for the number 2 spot. They rank right behind the top ranked Forward Air on that segment, and that was largely due to Covenant's growing expedited services. So, as I said, not a ton of movement near the top of these lists. These industry segment leaders really retaining their places, at the tippy top.
No, I think that's a good synopsis. And Michael, anything else to add as you look over the sector list that we've compiled this year?
Well, two sectors that kind of got my antennas going is one, is the package and carriers. I'm always amazed by it's FedEx and UPS, and it's everybody else. So it's just kind of that it's just the big two dogs, and then you have everyone. You have Pure Later, and then On Track, and then it's just kind of everyone else, and that, and it just kind of shows you the dominance of FedEx and UPS when it comes to parcel. And that is those are the main players that everyone outside of this industry knows when you talk about logistics in general. So you have that. And also, just being FedEx and UPS is, primarily those LTLs. You have one particular segment that I'm always hearing about. Maybe I'm just focused on is just the refrigerated segment. There's been a lot of moves when it comes to that particular segment. We talk about Hirschbach Motor Lanes, and their acquisition and just the big move that they made. They being a refrigerated trucking segment, and I believe they're number 3 on the list of refrigerated carriers. And also we have the new people on the list, the new fleets on the list, the 100 with national carriers. They're also a refrigerated truckload transportation and the livestock hauling service.
Great. Well, before we close here, I do also want to mention clearly that we're always encouraging companies to participate in our Top 100 For-Hire Carriers project. I mentioned the survey, of course, that we issue each year. We appreciate all the participation we get, companies that are willing to share some details about their operations so we can put this together. Always encouraging more to do so. And not even if you're not a top 100 company, not quite at that level at this point, we still publish a lot of data on quite a few mid-sized companies in our sector rankings. So we also encourage companies that are more medium-sized to also participate to see if you can earn a spot somewhere on our industry segment lists. So Mike, sort of final note here, how can companies get involved and participate in next year's Top 100 For-Hire Carriers project if they aren't already doing so?
Yeah, so the best way to get involved is to reach out and throw your hat in the ring. If you email tteditor@ttnews.com, you can request to be added to our survey distribution list. That way, when our data collecting surveys are released, your company will receive that and you'll be able to submit your survey response, and that will allow you to be considered for a spot on our Top 100 or any of the sector lists that we publish as well.
Yep, and it's amazing. We immediately finish one publication, we already start to think about the next one, and we're already gathering data for our top 100 private carriers list as we speak. So if you're a private fleet listening to this, the time is now to get involved as we put that one together for publication later this year. So, hey, I think this is a good stopping point. I think we've covered a lot of ground here and provided sort of a top level overview of the Top 100 project. So, Mike and Michael, thank you both for joining the podcast and sharing your insights, and also for all your hard work on this project and many others.
Thanks a lot, Seth.
Thanks for having us on.
If you're looking for strategic financial guidance to take your transportation and logistics operation to the next level, that's what we do at Summit Virtual CFO by Anders. Find out how at summitcpa.net.
So we hope you've enjoyed this in-depth look at the Transport Topics 2023 Top 100 For-Hire Carriers list. As a reminder, you can view the entire Top 100 and sector lists online at ttnews.com. And of course, if you're a Transport Topics subscriber, you already have a hard copy packaged with the June 26th issue of Transport Topics. We'll be back on this podcast later this year with additional episodes of our Inside the List series as we produce the rest of our annual Top 100 and Top 50 publications. As mentioned, the next one will be our Top 100 Private Carriers list in August. If you've enjoyed this episode of RoadSigns, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with me and the RoadSigns team. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a fresh episode of RoadSigns. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.